Welcome to the Future of Supply Chain, presented by Dynamo. Each episode, we sit down with leaders in the industry as we build the future of supply chain together. Let's get into the show. Here's our host, Santosh and Chris.
Hey, ladies and gents, welcome back to the Future Supply Chain Podcast. I'm your host, Santosh and Chris. Joining me today is Chris Jamroz, CEO of Roadrunner Freight. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much, Santosh. Thanks for having me on.
I am super excited to have you join and excited to jump in. And, for the benefit of our listeners, Roadrunner is a provider of LTL services between major metro areas. And I will quote kind of your company by saying, with the focus on tremendous service at a great value. And so with that, I can't help but to ask, what's the Chris story? How did you get into the world of LTL trucking?
Yeah, that's definitely off the beaten track for most, and certainly for myself. I'm a reformed investment banker, former graduate of Merrill Lynch and JP Morgan, and many moons ago, one of our investment banking clients who was doing a roll-up of armored cash businesses, armored trucks businesses across the United States and Canada, asked me to come in and help him run it. The business at that time was in technical bankruptcy. The stock had fallen from some decent levels to about 57 cents on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and I left the glamorous offices of JP Morgan as its CEO in Canada, and I started. And I moved my office to a warehouse in Pasadena in California and started fixing broken logistic platforms and kind of stuck. And that path ultimately led me to Roadrunner, 7 exits later and 8 platforms later. And here we are.
That's amazing. And so Roadrunner, in part to what you just alluded to, is known as the greatest comeback story in transportation.
Correct.
And you're a large part responsible for that comeback. But could you give us a bit of the institutional history, where the business is today, and equally kind of what's your vision for the future? Where are you leading us?
Yeah. So Roadrunner was a phenomenal business about 3 decades ago. It started very simply. It was Roadrunner Best in the West. From its very modest headquarters in Cudahy, Wisconsin, it was driving loads directly from Midwest to Pacific Northwest and Southern California. Obviously makes a lot of sense. Business going well. And then obviously super smart money gets involved. The private equity guys come in, and here we are. And we started acquiring businesses completely unrelated to the pure play LTL that Roadrunner was, and startling it with ultimately 37 acquisitions, completely unintegrated. You had 37 CFOs, 37 ERPs, 37 financial statements, bloated organizational structure, burning $22 million of cash per month at January 2020, when I had the privilege of walking through the door formally for the first time. It certainly has been a tremendous comeback story. And I quote, it's not my quote, actually, it came from investment bankers who came and told us that they've seen a lot of attempts at restructuring transportation businesses, because these are the businesses when you can get into trouble with relative ease. And we can talk about it a little later, but they have never seen one actually completed successfully. And for good or bad reasons, but not once had ever really come back to the tune that Roadrunner has. So I kind of coined that phrase, and now we obviously use it quite frequently every time we go to market and share the news with our investors and our employees and the broader stakeholder constituents.
I love that. And so kind of what does success look like? Have you achieved everything you want in your vision? What's kind of left? Where do you want to ultimately kind of lead Roadrunner as you've now come and you've turned it around, and it feels to be kind of on the path of growth?
Yeah. So I always, Santosh, think about sort of 12-month intervals, because I've always labored in very difficult situations that with the future's not certain. It's definitely not guaranteed. I give myself those 12 months that, whatever is at the end of that 12-month period is the goal, but then keeps resetting and upgrading. So as you can imagine, when we started, we're just saying, it was a rescue mission. We didn't want it to become a salvage mission. We really wanted to be a rescue mission, and we never lost the patient. So there's a fair degree of pride and effort went into that. The success today, you asked me if we achieved everything we wanted. At the end of each 12-month cycle, yes, but that keeps kind of reloading. So, the name of the game for 2024 in the midst of the, what probably is going to be the third year freight recession, it's going to be sustainable profitability. So we are well underway to do that. Beyond that, we have obviously growth and becoming the best in class. And we really want to be the best metro to metro direct LTL carrier across North America. And that kind of is the sort of the set of common values that we share today.
And so kind of coming in the situation you're in, you said burning $20 million a
22.
month.
Yeah.
22, 37 acquisitions over time, clearly a lot of bloat. So that's no joke, kind of turning that around and rescuing rather the patient at hand. What frameworks or problem-solving methodologies ultimately have you relied on in order to execute in such a fashion? Anything you'd be open, willing to share?
Yeah, I mean, we do have, I call it the sort of precise hands-on management of operations playbook that I've developed over, the 9 platforms that I've run, 7 exits that we've accomplished so far. That every situation is a little different, and you have to approach it with what I call with beginner's mind. If the catastrophic mistake people make in those situations when they come in and they say, okay, I've done it before. This looks very similar to something I run or something I just came out of. This is exactly, whenever I hear those words, we either sideline that individual or coach him or her very hard, because these are how big mistakes are made. You have to have that patience combined with sort of a sense of urgency, which sounds a little bit contradictory, but what it is extremely important is that you approach, you observe, and you understand where this organization is in its corporate life cycle, because it is a living organism. There are people, there's equipment being used, there are customers, there are institutional partnerships, there are shareholders. It's not a robot. It's a living organism, and you need to have that kind of diagnostician mindset, that you understand where the patient is, and not to kind of take those things too lightly. And with respect to the Roadrunner, what dawned upon us is that when you think about any month having between 20 and 22 working days, and that kind of cash burn of $22 million per month. So I used to tell the people that by lunchtime, we have just burned $500,000 on any given day. So that kind of profound sense of responsibility of, hey, listen, these are people's lives at stake. These are shareholders' capital at risk, and we need to act quickly. And the first thing is also to understand the story. And when you have 37 layered acquisitions, is very difficult. It's imagine you just need to kind of cut through that. So we've done a lot of things from selling the businesses that were performing that we could sell. And imagine we're talking January 2020. So there's just about 90 days since from the moment we walked through the door, a little virus kind of started making the news around the globe. So it was just very complex situations, and we solved about 9 businesses. We closed a few, and then we grouped a number of businesses that had a look and feel of a 3PL logistics business. And we named it Ascent, and we spun it out in a private transaction and ultimately called it Ascent Logistics, so that we could run that as a separate business. And what we were left with is a pure play LTL platform that we really jumped on and focused our energy and put their concerted, disparate efforts into ever since.
Amazing. So you mentioned LTL, all right, and that is the focus of Roadrunner. But I've come to find that the knowledge around LTL tends to vary person to person in the supply chain. And so I'd love just to kind of do a quick primer as to what's LTL, how does it work, so on and so forth. And so LTL, less than truckload freight, but I'd love for you to kind of share with the audience, our listeners, how should they think about LTL when they're out like at a cocktail party and they're trying to show they're smart about transportation for whatever reason? How should they describe LTL to their friends?
Yeah, that's a one-stop party of people trying to impress them with LTL knowledge. I'm telling you, that's something. But let's take a crack at this. So, everybody's been on a highway. Everybody drove past or had a big semi drive past them. It's a long truck, 53-foot trailers. I don't know if you've ever been inside the trailer. I actually walked inside one here in Minneapolis last weekend during our terminal visit. It's a long, big cube of, destined to carry a lot of freight. And not every single time you need the entire 53 linear foot of trailer capacity to send to whatever you need to send. And oftentimes you do not have the budget to get the full trailer. So what comes to play at LTL, the less than truckload, basically means that you don't need the entire truck. You take a portion of that truck. So effectively you buy like a ticket on a ship, and you buy yourself a few cubic feet of space inside the trailer. And effectively, because every trailer has has freight from multiple shippers, and shippers we call customers in this business shippers. So because inside every LTL trailer you have freight destined for multiple shippers, you kind of pay a fractional price for moving that freight. And particularly at the time of the recessionary concerns, economic slowdowns concerns, LTL comes full force because you're saving a ton of money. At the same time, at the full economic expansionary period, when the truckload rates are spiking up and everything's very expensive, LTL still comes and undercuts that, because then this is destined for anyone who doesn't need a full trailer. And it doesn't need to be a mom and pop. Could be world's largest retailers, world's biggest volume aggregator companies. They all at times use LTL as part of the mix. Usually about 10 to 15% of any shipper's need mix, sort of freight mix, is LTL. And this is where they sort of try to optimize the overall spend and cost of transportation.
And, are there certain types of freight that are best suited for LTL? You hear a lot about domestic manufacturing being a big pull on the LTL markets, but how should one think about the types of things that are best suited for such a journey?
It's truly everything, Santosh. It's really, when you walk through an LTL terminal, there will be things that will make you kind of stop and ponder and scratch the back of your head and tilt your head and just marveling at what people try to ship. But it is, you're right, the domestic manufacturing is huge users. So whoever needs to get the stuff from one point to the manufacturing base, importers, even, imagine every automotive company, where do they get the parts from? Usually from somewhere around Laredo, in Texas, where the Mexican manufacturing plants produce, the suppliers produce the components, and they deliver. They had it shipped over across the border. That stuff needs to be picked up from there and delivered to Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Carolinas, Georgia, wherever, Alabama, wherever those big manufacturing plants are. Also, the importers, the biggest flow of imports comes from two ports in the United States, the Long Beach and Los Angeles port in Southern California, and New Jersey, New York port in the Northeast. And between those two, about 85 to 90% of all imports entering the U.S. come in. So you have those massive input points, and the stuff needs to be segregated. And whatever comes through those ports, this is an interesting fact, 50% is to be delivered within a 400-mile radius, and 50% needs to get to some point inland. So about 50% of every container that comes through the ports in the United States needs to be trucked or railed somewhere inland to a point in the middle of the country. And that's what we do.
So I want to discuss the topic of pricing in LTL. It is what one would call related to dimensioning or dimensional pricing in part. And therefore, it tends to be complex. Not everybody can necessarily quote it if you're a broker. And I tend to describe it as algorithmic as a technology investor, right? But could you explain and kind of give us the basics on how pricing works in this part of the transportation market?
Yeah, so it's a very good point, Santosh. So pricing is very complex because you're buying fractional seat on a freighter inside a trailer, and that could be weight related, size related, cubic feet related, et cetera, et cetera. So the LTL pricing is the most sophisticated. That's a euphemism, the most complex and difficult to understand from probably any modes in any supply chain and I've seen probably most of them. It's very convoluted. What it is, it's meant to that you really optimize and you do not penalize unfairly the other uses of space inside the trailer. So because you could ship, a lamp, let's say, and it's not a joke, you could send a 6-foot lamp inside a trailer. Now, you'd say, well, it doesn't weigh a lot, but you know what? It takes a lot of vertical space. So there are dimensionizers. There are those sophisticated machines that measure and kind of try to algorithmically break down the components of size and weight to make sure that the other users of space inside the trailer are not unfairly penalized by the virtue of what they're shipping. And that goes into like how you utilize the trailer and giving the fact that there's a tremendous, I'm sure you've heard this and you know that better than most, that with the truckload sector, the biggest component is the weight, right? The overall weight of the trailer is a big concern. Now in LTL, you will cube out before you weight out. That's a kind of rule. Because of the diversity of freight, I rarely saw it in my career, that the weight is a concern, but the sizing is the matter. And in terms of the pricing the pricing is like a bracketed hedge, a risk mounted hedge, and you attack guys, so you'd understand it very well. So you don't have this, the pricing in LTL never goes as high. The amplitude of outcomes is never as high in the truckload market when the capacity spikes to, all the way to the skies, and just it becomes very unaffordable. But then when the hard times hit, it really bottoms hard. So it's kind of with LTL, you never had that gravy train, but you also never had those hard things, because it is a sort of a cost optimization, cost arbitrage game that kind of prevents overpricing, and also provides a certain pricing floor. So it's kind of pricing is, I think, the most fascinating aspect of LTL.
Yeah. How important is it for a carrier to adopt a philosophy and sticking to it? Because the way you described it, if I have a 53-foot trailer and I misprice, I'm ultimately on the hook as a carrier. Therefore, I need to kind of figure out whatever that optima is between kind of service, managing costs, and kind of commercially competitive pricing. And I guess I kind of have to own it through cycles. Is that a fair statement?
Spot on. And if you get it wrong, you're out of business. The recovery from that could be, unattainable if you get it wrong. So spot on comment. It's incredibly important, and you have to be very good. And a lot of people, when they get into big trouble, is they have a great idea and they pick the niche within the LTL sector, whatever that may be, whether they want to be a regional player, whether they want to be the expedite player in the short distances and have 280-mile average length of haul and be the next day provider, same day provider, whatever it is. And they start doing it, and it starts up really well. And it's great. And then what happens? an idea comes like, haha, now we're going to experiment because an opportunity presents itself, and you lose focus, you distract yourself, you step away from that investment thesis that you've all agreed on. And that's how we lead to a lot of roadkill along that LTL highway that you see from time to time. But the people who stick to the vision, they stick to the strategy they've agreed on, and they are unapologetically psychotic about executing those, they tend to do very well. And over the years, if you look at the kind of the stratosphere of LTL blue bloods, the big guys, they've done it so well, and they've been so good and so disciplined that it's truly admirable and remarkable.
Amazing. I want to wrap up kind of this primer on LTL by raising the concept of accessorial charges. Shippers show up that I know and they'll complain about them, but what are they? Why do they occur? Why has it been a challenge for the industry to be a bit more transparent as to kind of how they end up, I guess being created, but also the necessity to have them?
Yeah. So it's again, I always go with this philosophy of do not punish folks unfairly inside the same trailer. That's what the accessories. Imagine you shipping, I don't know, 1,500 pillows, fluffy pillows, and the other guys are shipping tractor tires. When it comes to transporting hub to hub, it may not be a lot of different, but when it comes to the delivery, would you like to have a power lift gate when you're unloading tractor tires, or would you rather do it yourself? I would imagine you want a lift gate, so you want to pay for them. But at the same time, the guy who shipped 1,500 pillows, I mean, you don't need a power lift. You don't need to pay for that. So you do not want to unfairly penalize people for things that they do not use, or just because they inside of things. So accessories will be always the most disputed. It provides colorfulness and a little drama for this little business that we're in. But they are there to protect the shippers, and they are there to protect the carriers. And it's like a little, locked mechanisms that keeps everyone in check.
I love that. I love that explanation. Makes a lot of sense. You mentioned a few minutes ago, we are now going to the third year of the freight recession here in North America. Stepping back, like, where's the LTL market at right now? How should people be thinking about the current freight cycle and how LTL is faring?
So LTL is a combined lesson of collective learning experiences and over the decades. So what is very interesting about LTL market, the big families or the big corporations that have really dominated the rating, the top of the charts in LTL, they've been at it for, let's say, 4 or 5 decades. They've learned a lot. They've learned a lot since 2008, 2009, but we're trying to get a little bit too cute. As a matter of fact, they were trying to drive Yellow out of market through a price war. That really hurt them. They nearly got themselves out of business in the process. Since then, the kind of people are market share donors rather than takers. As long as they manage yield, they manage their profitability of businesses, they run sustainable businesses. So LTL has, as I mentioned, the amplitude of outcomes in LTL is a lot lower. It doesn't follow those spikes, with an ocean shipping or air cargo or truckload. It's very boring. It's almost dull. It's kind of moves a little bit, but it's been fairly steady. Now, it feels weak. It feels like it's not there, but it's happening. It's been happening for quite some time. Last year, around this time, Yellow, the number 3 largest LTL carrier in the market, went bankrupt. That was 10% of overall LTL capacity. Within 2 weeks, Santosh, boom, that capacity was consumed. So there's a lot of excess capacity in the LTL market. The pricing is disciplined, but again, nobody's going to be making the $1 billion bonuses, tech-like bonuses this year in LTL. And you know what? We're probably going to have another year of, a lot of capacity adjustments, because we still have too many carriers, too many drivers, too much equipment, too much rolling stock for what the demand shapes up to be. Plus, you have all those little things like, the presidential elections and those little things that can kind of potentially impact the demand scale. So I think we opt for another year of challenging outcomes. So ourselves, just to finish up, we have zero expectations of macroeconomic help in 2024. The first half of 2025, entire game plan for us is, fix what we can control within our four walls.
Sure. Now, we've seen an explosion of freight brokers that historically have been very FTL, full truckload focused, but as the brokerage industry itself is in part reconciling with the fact that it kind of overbuilt, right? Had a lot of headcount, a lot of firms that happened to crop up during the COVID times. Those that have seen a couple cycles, I've heard express where they don't necessarily have the capability, trying to maybe get a toehold into LTL, which has largely been, I guess, kind of relegated to very few brokerages who have done that historically very well and consistently well. Do you see that as something that we should be thinking about or anticipating more brokerage or brokered loads inside of the LTL market, or not necessarily?
So I can tell you that I command a whopping 1% of the LTL market in North America. So just all things considered, I'm a very small guy, but it's a huge deal for us. We have wonderful broker partners who have flourished with us, and they calling us, and we have sort of designed our shipping mix to have certain capacity dedicated to brokers, because
Amazing.
when LTL, there are three components. So maybe there are five components, depending how you look. You have the pickup, cross dock, line haul, cross dock, delivery, right? The five. So it sounds very simple. It's simple. It doesn't mean it's easy to execute, because that's what the thing. But the truckload component, that long haul, the line haul component, it may as well look, smells, feels like truckload. You have a full trailer, hopefully close to a full trailer, and there is a tractor pulling that trailer from Chicago to LA, from New York to Atlanta, through Miami to Dallas, Chicago to Pacific Northwest. So brokers, with their capacity and their ability to match loads with the drivers, can become very helpful and very economically enticing solution for us, alternative for that mid-mile solution, that line haul component. So we do see, Santosh, a lot of brokers. We work with a lot of them. We're using the technology platforms on the load boards, and we've really benefited from that, and customers love it because it helps keep the price in check, and service is improving every single day.
So if you had $1 million to invest, I'm kind of, I guess, channeling some of your prior life as a financier. If you had $1 million to invest today, what problem area that's prevalent across the LTL industry would you invest in to solve?
It would be the technology, but at the point of our chief technology officer came from, he was the global head of artificial intelligence, one of the largest consulting companies. He always says, like, how could you do that to me? Drag me from a high tech to an ultra low tech environment. But there's a lot of technology. We are just bizarrely lagging behind the world in this brand, and it's kind of, there's no culpability because these are all carriers and shippers combined. But as you know, that we're still discussing the electronification of the bill of lading. It's still a lot of paperwork. It's just so kind of the technology aimed at reducing waste, reducing manual laborers tasks, and then kind of going through it. Think about it. There is no better business that would lend itself better to autonomous trucking, dock automation, all those kind of things, because you have tremendous scalable kind of test environments that would provide statistically viable data sets for anyone who wants to incur it. But if you have to fill in stuff with a pen, it's just that's just not going to happen, right? So it's just thing. So yeah, I would definitely put as much emphasis I possibly could behind sort of the stepping back from the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, into the sort of 21st century and trying to start with electronification and automating of their laborious manual tasks.
So, Chris, you've dropped a lot of wisdom and knowledge on us here. I'm going to bring us home. One of the things that I love to do with guests is what I call rapid fire. I'm going to make 3 statements, and after each statement, I just want your immediate 15-second response.
All right.
You good to go?
Let's do it.
You mentioned this already, but I have to raise it specifically. The impact of the U.S. elections on supply chains.
It's gonna be monumental. If we go back to the tariffs, the world thrives on free trade. If you start messing around with the free trade, you're gonna mess up the global commerce. Not good.
The most overused buzzword in business.
Teamwork. and what is it? Technologically enabled platforms. Complete nonsense. Complete nonsense.
If you could have dinner with any CEO, who would it be?
Oh God. Jamie Dimon. Always been my absolute favorite.
All right. And as a JP alum, that makes a lot of sense. With that, Chris, thank you so much for joining us, chatting LTL, chatting Roadrunner. It's been awesome to see what you've done online, and continue to wish the greatest success.
Santosh, you're a kick-ass host. I had the most fun I've had in a long time. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks for watching. Follow us at dynamo.vc for all the latest episodes. We'll see you next time.